Talk to fluency from beginner to fluent.
Take your English skills to the next level.
Have you ever found yourself, reading English perfectly, understanding every single word on the page, but then when you actually try to speak, it just doesn't sound, natural, maybe a bit stiff? Or maybe you're preparing for a big English exam, something like IELTS, and you're wondering how you can genuinely impress the examiners, not just with what you say, but, how you say it with real fluency. Okay, let's unpack this a little. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the world of natural English speech. We're going to explore how native speakers really communicate. It's not just words, it's the rhythm, the sounds, and more importantly, how you can use some of those techniques to sound more authentic, more confident, especially when it really counts.
Yeah, and what's really interesting here is that sounding more native-like isn't just about knowing more words or, nailing every grammar rule. It's more about understanding the music of the language, those subtle sound changes, the rhythm, and also the strategies for speaking that make you sound fluent and just easy to understand. Our sources for this deep dive offer some really practical insights, both into those nuances of spoken English and also effective ways to structure what you say.
That's a really key point. So our mission today is basically to distill that expert advice. We'll look at mastering those tricky sounds, understanding why native speakers sometimes smush words together, and crucially, how to structure your answers for maximum impact. Whether that's just chatting or in a formal test like IELTS, it's kind of a shortcut to sounding really articulate. So let's jump right in. The sounds of natural English. This is where it gets fascinating, right? Often the way we speak doesn't really sound like the words written down in a book, and it's not a mistake, it's just how natural conversation flows. So what are some of those key differences? And maybe more importantly, why do they happen?
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, it really comes down to efficiency and rhythm. Our brains are wired to communicate efficiently. So native speakers, they automatically connect words, use contractions. Sometimes sounds get dropped or changed. Even whole words might get left out. And we often don't even realize we're doing it. Linguists call it things like elision dropping sounds or assimilation sounds changing to be like their neighbors. These are really the hallmarks of natural, unforced speech. The key thing is, natural English isn't about hitting every single letter perfectly. It's about a fluid system. Sounds adapt. Getting this helps your speaking, sure, but it massively helps your listening too.
That's a great way to think about it, and not every letter, but the flow. Can you give us some solid examples, those sound changes we hear all the time?
Absolutely. Let's start with some really common ones, connecting words and contractions. Think about asking someone's job, what do you do? In real speech, it almost always sounds like, what I do?
Right, I hear that constantly.
Yeah, or asking, what do you want? That often becomes, what do you wanna? And the nuance is interesting. Like you said, what do you want to drink? Sounds friendly. But what do you want could sound annoyed. It really depends on the tone, the context.
That's so true. Context is everything. What about other phrases like that?
Oh, loads of them. What are you doing? Often sounds like, what are you doing? Or you might hear the alternative, what are you up to? Both are totally natural.
Okay.
And if you're ordering food with a friend, say, what are you having? It often comes out as, what are you having?
Yeah.
These reductions are everywhere. It just shows how much we adapt speech for speed and ease.
So it's not just the what questions. Does this happen with polite questions too? Like using do you or would you?
Precisely. Take do you want a coffee? 80A, that very often reduces to do you want a coffee. You hear that sort of DJ sound at the start? Like, Jungle, do you wanna? It's much quicker.
Yeah, I can hear that.
And for something a bit more formal, would you like a coffee?
Yep.
That often softens to would ya like a coffee? Sometimes even would ya like a coffee? It seems small, but it makes a big difference in sounding natural. And crucially, it helps you understand people who speak like that.
And what about pronouns? Like he or him in questions? I feel like sometimes the eighth sound just vanishes.
Another perfect example of elision, again, it's efficiency. In questions, especially when he isn't stressed, that eighth sound often disappears. So does he like it becomes something like does he like it? The sounds merge. Similarly, was he happy? Can sound like was he happy? And has he called you might become has he called you. These little phonetic shifts, they seem tiny written down, but they massively impact how fluent you sound, and maybe even more how easily you understand fast, natural speech. And it's not lazy, it's just efficient articulation.
It's amazing how much gets condensed. And I can totally see how recognizing these helps listening just as much as speaking. So, okay, how do we take this natural flow and use it in more structured speaking? especially for something like an IELTS exam where clarity and coherence are also super important.
Right, that's the bridge we need to build. For structured speaking, like IELTS, naturalness is good, definitely, but you also need absolute clarity and a logical flow that's easy for the examiner to follow. The sources we looked at offer some really good frameworks for different question types. They help you sound both fluent and coherent. Let's start with part 1, usually simple, direct questions. The key here is brevity with substance. Start with a direct answer. Pause just slightly. Then add 1 or 2 key details. The best way to find those details, ask yourself what or why about your first answer. Shows you understood and adds depth right away.
Okay, can you give us an example or two for part 1? Make it concrete.
Sure. Imagine the question is, what's the most interesting part of your town? A good direct answer. The beach. Exactly. Then you think, why? Or what about it? So you add, the beach. It's actually a very famous beach in the UK, and it's a real focal point for the community. We have lots of festivals and shows there, and families spend a lot of their free time there. See how the details explain why it's interesting?
Yeah, that makes sense. It expands on the first point.
Right. Another common one. What do you enjoy doing in your free time? Direct answer. I like boxing. Then the details. It's a hobby I started a few years back, actually, and it's become a pretty big part of my life. I try to go to the gym 3 times a week. I find it's a great way to stay healthy and, honestly, a really good stress reliever, too. Cool. The main idea is precision. Enough detail to be complete, but don't ramble. Rambling can lead to mistakes, especially under pressure. Concise but impactful.
Got it. Keep part 1 simple but detailed enough. So what about part 2? That's the longer one, right? Describing something for 1 to 2 minutes.
Yeah, part 2 needs a bit more structure. Our sources suggest a kind of narrative arc. It's really effective. Past, present, opinion, and maybe future. You start by saying clearly what you'll describe, I'd like to talk about. Then, jump straight into a story about your first experience with it, or how you first encountered it. This past story bit is great. It naturally takes up about a minute, keeps you focused, and makes it personal.
Okay, so start with a story.
Exactly. After that past story, you smoothly shift to describing it now, in the present. Maybe say something like, so let me tell you a bit more about what it's like now. That's maybe 40 seconds. Then add your personal opinion, for me personally, or what I like about it is. And finally, maybe a quick line about a future hope related to it, though honestly, you might not always get to that last part if you've been detailed enough earlier.
Okay, so if the topic was, say, describing a beautiful place like Bath, how would that structure work?
Right, you'd start, okay, I'd like to tell you about the city of Bath. Direct. Then the past story. My first time visiting Bath was maybe 5 years ago. I took one of those open-top bus tours, and I was just completely amazed by how beautiful it was. The architecture, the Georgian buildings, the Roman history everywhere, even the little coffee shops. I'd seen pictures, but being there was something else.
Okay, nice story. Then present.
Then transition. So let me tell you a bit more about it today. Bath is obviously a really historical city, famous for its Roman past, especially the Roman baths, which are still there. And what's really striking is how all the buildings are made from this uniform, sort of honey-colored sandstone. It gives the whole city a very elegant look.
In the opinion.
Finally, for me personally, it's actually one of my favorite cities in the UK. Because even though it's so historic, it feels quite small and it's much less crowded than, say, London. It just makes it a really pleasant place to walk around and explore. See? The future part might not be needed there, but if you had time, you could add, I really hope to go back someday, maybe take my family, they've never been. It provides a nice structure without feeling robotic.
That's a really clear framework. It gives you something to follow, but still lets you be natural. Okay, now, part 3. That's often seen as the trickiest part, isn't it? It's more abstract, less personal.
It is, and it's designed to be less structured, partly to see if you can handle more complex discussion without sounding repetitive. Examiners look out for that. Here, you still give a direct answer first. Pause. Then elaborate with maybe 2 or 3 sentences. Use those why, what, where, when, who, how many questions to guide your details. But here's the absolute key for part 3, the real deep dive part. You must follow up with a specific, broader example. Focus on society or your city, your country, maybe culture in general, not just another personal story. This shows you can think more abstractly.
Okay. So shifting from personal anecdotes to broader societal examples, that makes sense for showing higher level thinking. Can you give us an example or two for part 3?
Sure. Let's say the question is, why do you think people like to travel? Direct answer. Well, I think people mainly like to experience things that are different from their everyday lives. Details. Most people have pretty similar routines, work, home. So there's this desire for new experiences, whether that's just seeing a different part of their own country or maybe experiencing entirely different cultures abroad. Now, the crucial broader example, specifically here in Korea, a lot of people travel to places like the East Coast or maybe Jeju Island. And I think a big reason is that these places offer a much slower pace of life, more nature compared to the really fast-paced city life many people have. It's a genuine escape, see?
Yeah.
It connects the general idea to a specific societal trend.
That's a great example. It develops the point really well. How about a question on negative aspects, something society talks about a lot?
Good one. Question. Do you think there are negative impacts of tourism? Answer, yes, definitely. I think there can be quite a few negative impacts, especially on the environment. Details. When large numbers of tourists gather in specific popular spots, it inevitably puts a strain on the local environment. You see problems with litter, erosion from too many people walking trails, and sometimes very rapid development that isn't sustainable. Then the broader specific example. For instance, I actually saw this myself on Boracay Island in the Philippines a few years ago. There was significant litter, and you could see the environmental damage caused by the sheer volume of tourists. It was quite sad, actually, to witness the impact of over-tourism like that. Even though it starts with "I saw," the focus isn't the personal trip, it's using Boracay as a clear example of a wider societal problem.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So pulling all this together, what does it mean for you, the listener, trying to get more fluent, maybe aiming for a better IELTS score? It really sounds like blending that natural sound with these kinds of strategic ways of speaking, a bit of a balancing act.
It is, and this brings up a really important point. The good news is, those natural things we talked about earlier, the contractions like wanna for want to, gonna for going to, they are absolutely fine to use in speaking assessments like IELTS. In fact, they're expected. They are part of natural spoken English. Using them shows you're comfortable, shows fluency. So I am going to go absolutely becomes I'm going to go in conversation. Just remember, you drop the to after gonna.
Right, no go on a to.
Exactly. And I want to go becomes I want to go. These aren't slang you need to avoid. They're just how people talk.
So we shouldn't be afraid of sounding too informal using those in an exam.
Not at all. They're standard conversational forms. Other examples. Should we go? Often sounds like, should we go? When you're suggesting something. Or talking about the past. Should have gone becomes, should have gone. Expressing regret. Could have gone. Often sounds like, could have gone. Talking about possibilities you didn't take. These aren't just shortcuts. They reflect how spoken English works efficiently. But, and this is key, the ultimate goal isn't to sound exactly like a native speaker from London or New York or wherever. That's often impossible and honestly a frustrating goal. The real goal is to improve your pronunciation, gain more control over your spoken English. That's what leads naturally to higher scores and, more importantly, just better, more confident communication in your life. And don't forget the listening benefit. When you understand why what are you doing sounds like it does, your ear gets tuned in. Movies, songs, conversations, everything becomes easier to understand. So my advice is approach this whole process with a sense of, playfulness. Practice consistently, but don't aim for some rigid, unattainable perfection. It's about enhancing your voice, making you a better communicator. That's such a fantastic way to look at it, a really great deep dive into spoken English nuances. It's not about pretending to be someone else, but about understanding the real flow of the language, using strategies, and just becoming more confident and capable.
Yeah.
Really insightful stuff. So we've looked at how native speakers connect sounds, use contractions, why that happens, and we've unpacked some powerful, really practical strategies for structuring your answers so you sound both natural and articulate, especially useful for exams like IELTS. It really has been a deep dive into not just learning English words, but truly speaking the language.
Yeah, and the key takeaway for you listening is that becoming more fluent isn't about memorizing rigid rules. It's about understanding the rhythm, the flow of real conversation, and then applying that knowledge strategically. So experiment. Practice actively. Listen really closely to how English is spoken all around you, music, films, podcasts, real people. The more you tune into these sounds and patterns, the more they'll just naturally become part of how you speak. And if you're looking for more insights, more guidance on your language journey, remember you can always find more resources and continue your deep dive with us. See you next episode and Talk to Fluent YouTube channel.
Talk to Fluency from beginner to fluent.
Take your English skills to the next level.